The prologue of the tragedy of Romeo and Juliet tells us that an ancient feud between two prominent families in the city of Verona has broken out once again with fighting in the streets.
It goes on to say that the feud will finally end, but only after two lovers, one from each household, die because of the feud.
In the opening scene, we're introduced to the feud between the Capulets and the Montagues, when a pair of servants from each household start taunting each other in the street.
Benvolio, a friend of Romeo's and a Montague, and Tybalt, Juliet's cousin and a Capulet, arrive on the scene, and soon the war of words turns into a brawl. The head of each household, old Montague and old Capulet, threaten to join in the fray, with their wives holding them back.
But the Prince of Verona shows up, and he's pissed. He breaks up the fight and warns that the next person to disturb the peace will be put to death.
The crowds disperse, and Montague and his wife stick around to talk to Benvolio about the strange behavior of their son Romeo, who stays out by himself all night and locks himself in his room all day.
Romeo approaches, and Benvolio tells Romeo's parents to leave so that he can try to find out more.
In his talk with Benvolio, we learn that Romeo is in love with a woman who isn't interested in him. Benvolio encourages Romeo to forget about her and to start looking at other women.
On a different street, old Capulet chats with Paris, a young nobleman and a relative of the prince, about marrying his daughter Juliet. Capulet points out that Juliet is not quite 14 years old yet, and tells Paris he should try to win her heart first. Capulet then sends a servant out to deliver invitations to a party the Capulets are having that night.
But the servant is illiterate, so he stops two people on the street, Romeo and Benvolio, to help him read what's on the invitation. That's how Romeo and Benvolio learn that there will be a party at the Capulets, and they decide to attend. Romeo hopes to catch a glimpse of his crush, Rosaline, and Benvolio hopes Romeo will see other women who will make Romeo forget about Rosaline.
Over at the Capulet estate, Lady Capulet tells Juliet about Paris's proposal to marry her. Juliet says she hasn't really thought about marriage, but she'll give Paris a look.
Back in the streets, Romeo, Benvolio, and Mercutio make plans to crash the Capulet party. Since it's a masque party, they can go in disguise. Mercutio and Romeo argue about the importance of dreams, and Mercutio gives his famous Queen Mab speech.
Romeo says he has a bad feeling. He thinks that going to the party will somehow lead to his untimely death, but then says he accepts his fate, whatever it brings.
At the party, Romeo spots Juliet and falls instantly and madly in love.
Tybalt recognizes Romeo's voice, and he asks his uncle for permission to throw Romeo out. But Capulet gives Tybalt strict orders not to disrupt the party.
Romeo sees a chance to talk to Juliet. Their brief exchange forms a perfect sonnet and leads to a kiss.
Juliet's nurse arrives to say that Juliet's mother is calling her, and it's only then that Romeo finds out that Juliet is a Capulet.
Which is going to make this relationship much more complicated.
Benvolio tells Romeo they should quit while they're ahead and leave the party.
And that's when Juliet finds out that the boy she just fell in love with is a Montague, her family's mortal enemy.
Outside the party, Romeo already can't stand to be away from Juliet, and he jumps a wall into the Capulet orchard.
Benvolio and Mercutio just miss him and eventually give up trying to find him.
In the orchard, Romeo sees a light come on in the Capulet household.
It turns out it's Juliet's window, and she comes out on her balcony to think out loud about her love for Romeo.
Romeo calls out to her. They declare their undying love for each other. They could care less about the feud. What do names matter anyway?
Juliet says that if Romeo's love is honorable, he should send for her the next day so that they can be wed.
That same morning, Romeo visits Friar Lawrence to ask him to perform the ceremony. The friar thinks there's a chance that this wedding could bring the feud to an end, so he agrees.
Back in the street, Benvolio and Mercutio are still wondering where Romeo is. Benvolio tells Mercutio that Tybalt has sent Romeo a note challenging him to a duel. Romeo shows up and they tease him some more about his love for Rosaline, knowing nothing about Juliet.
Juliet's nurse and a Capulet servant show up. After Mercutio and Benvolio leave, Romeo tells the nurse that Juliet should come to Friar Lawrence's in the afternoon so that the two can be secretly married.
Juliet waits anxiously in her room for the nurse to return with some news. She finally shows up and, after much coaxing from Juliet, tells her that she'll be married to Romeo that afternoon.
Romeo and Juliet are reunited in Friar Lawrence's cell, and they all leave to perform the marriage ceremony.
Back in the streets, Benvolio and Mercutio argue about which of them is more likely to pick a fight. Tybalt and his men show up, looking for Romeo.
Tybalt and Mercutio almost come to blows when Romeo shows up. Tybalt tries to pick a fight with Romeo, but Romeo won't have it, telling Tybalt he now has reason to love him. Disgusted, Mercutio draws on Tybalt and they fight.
Romeo comes between them to try to break it up, but Tybalt reaches his sword under Romeo's arm and stabs Mercutio.
Tybalt flees, and Mercutio curses the feud. Benvolio leaves with Mercutio to get him some help, but comes back moments later to tell Romeo that Mercutio is dead.
Just then, Tybalt returns to challenge Romeo. Angry about the death of his friend, Romeo accepts the challenge this time and kills Tybalt.
Benvolio tells Romeo to run. The prince promised to kill anyone who disturbed the peace again.
Romeo flees just before the prince, the Montagues, and the Capulets arrive.
After hearing Benvolio's report, the prince gives Romeo a break and, instead of a death sentence, banishes Romeo from Verona.
Knowing nothing about the fight in the street, Juliet waits in her room thinking about the honeymoon visit Romeo will make that night.
The nurse returns with the horrible news of the death of Juliet's cousin, Tybalt, and the banishment of her new husband, Romeo. Now that they're married, Romeo's banishment is as bad as his death, and Juliet is devastated.
The nurse assures her that she can find Romeo and make sure he visits Juliet tonight as planned before he leaves Verona for good.
At Friar Lawrence's cell, Romeo is as distraught as Juliet, and the friar tries to talk some sense into him.
The nurse shows up to tell Romeo that Juliet waits for him that night.
The friar tells them both to have patience because things might still work out.
At the Capulets, Juliet's parents tell Paris that Juliet is too upset by Tybalt's death to meet with him about the marriage proposal.
Paris is about to leave when Juliet's father suddenly decides to agree to the marriage proposal and sets the date for Thursday, in just 3 days.
Up in Juliet's room, Romeo and Juliet are trying to say goodbye to each other. Romeo needs to leave Verona or be killed on sight.
Romeo leaves just as Juliet's mom arrives at the room to tell Juliet that she'll be marrying Paris soon.
The discussion doesn't go well, and soon her father is there too, threatening to disown her if she doesn't marry Paris.
Paris meets with Friar Lawrence to arrange the marriage ceremony for Thursday, when Juliet appears.
Awkward.
Once Paris leaves, Juliet pulls out a knife and says she's ready to kill herself if some solution can't be found.
But it turns out the friar has a plan.
The friar tells Juliet that he has a potion that will make her appear dead. When she's discovered by her parents, they'll take her to the family tomb.
By the time the potion wears off, the friar and Romeo will be in the tomb to greet her. Frightening as it sounds, Juliet leaps at the chance.
The Capulet household is busy with wedding preparations. Juliet returns from the friar and apologizes to her father. Her father, encouraged by his daughter's change of heart, decides to move the marriage to the very next morning.
Left alone in her room, Juliet works up her courage and drinks the sleeping potion.
Wedding preparations continue into the morning. Capulet sends the nurse to get Juliet when he hears Paris and his musicians arriving.
But what the nurse finds is a seemingly dead Juliet. Soon everyone is in the room grieving over her.
The friar does his best to calm them down, explaining that Juliet is in heaven now, and what could be better than that? He says they must take her to the church and to her grave.
Meanwhile, the exiled Romeo sits in the town of Mantua, knowing nothing about the friar's plan. He says he had a dream that Juliet woke him from death with a kiss, so he's feeling optimistic.
Just then, his friend Balthazar shows up with the news that Juliet has been taken to the family tomb.
Assuming she's dead, Romeo makes a plan to return to Verona. Before he leaves, he visits an apothecary and buys a deadly poison.
Meanwhile, Friar Lawrence sits in his cell waiting for news from Romeo. But Friar John arrives and tells Friar Lawrence that his letter to Romeo, detailing the sleeping potion plan, was never delivered.
Now in a panic, Friar Lawrence decides to rush to the tomb by himself so that someone is there when Juliet wakes up.
The final scene opens with Paris and his page bringing flowers to the Capulet tomb.
Then Romeo and Balthazar arrive and Paris hides to watch them.
Romeo tells Balthazar that he's come here to get a ring from Juliet's hand and tells Balthazar to leave.
Realizing that it's Romeo, Paris tries to arrest him for returning from his exile.
Romeo tries to get Paris to leave, but they end up fighting, and Romeo kills Paris.
Realizing that Paris also loved Juliet, Romeo decides to bring him to her tomb.
Now in the tomb, Romeo marvels that Juliet looks as beautiful as ever.
He then promises not to leave her there alone, takes out his poison, and drinks it.
Out in the churchyard, Friar Lawrence arrives.
He enters the tomb, discovering the dead bodies of Romeo and Paris just as Juliet is waking up.
Friar Lawrence hears the watchman approaching and fears being caught at the tomb now that it's clear his plan has been a disaster.
He tries to get Juliet to leave with him, but she refuses.
Now alone, Juliet sees Romeo's dead body. She kisses him, hoping to get some of the poison from his lips.
With the watchman about to enter the tomb, she takes Romeo's dagger and kills herself.
The watchmen arrive, followed by the prince, the Capulets, old Montague, and the friar.
The prince gets a full report from Balthazar, Paris's page, and the friar.
Knowing the whole story, the prince rebukes Capulet and Montague for the destruction their feud has caused.
Moved by the death of their children, they vow to end the feud, with each promising to pay tribute to the child of the other family in statues of pure gold.
With the rising sun hiding behind the clouds, the prince delivers the final words.
For never was a story of more woe than this of Juliet and her Romeo.